what I'm capable of when you talk to me like that. All the crying that I've done inside. Well, this is not just a lover's spy. Everyone keeps on telling me that pride comes before a fall. A fall. I keep on saying you don't know me. You don't know me at all. All this lying, all this cheating drives me up the wall. Hey, yeah, yeah, you don't know me.
From someone from the outside looking inside, they would think that this is the perfect family. But inside, when the doors were closed, the abuse was horrible.
I used to think that domestic violence only happened
to other people.
To people who lived in rough neighbourhoods.
To my people.
I used to think it happened to everybody, actually.
To uneducated people.
And to poor people.
And to straight people.
To them, someone else. I'd never put myself in that category because it was such an ugly category.
My cultural background is Australian.
I'm an Aboriginal descendant.
Pacific community.
East Timor.
Scotland. I'm from Argentina.
Grew up in New Zealand.
I'm Australian born.
And I'm third generation Bog Irish.
I identify myself as a Torres Strait Islander.
My parents are from Samoan background.
My mother was Aboriginal, my father was Italian. I had a very strict Catholic upbringing and I suffered the effects of domestic violence on my mother from my father.
My childhood was great. It was what every child really wanted. I had great parents and family and friends, and I went to private school my whole life, and everything was as much as it could have been, much as I could have hoped it was going to be.
My childhood was domestic violence, childhood sexual abuse, all the way through. 6 months of the year Mum and Dad were sober, 6 months of the year they were drunk, and it was very violent. Mum and Dad liked to come at each other with axes or knives or broken bottles. They would bring people home from the pub. I've woken up all my life with strangers in my bed touching me, trying to get to me. So when I grew up and I got into a relationship, my first relationship, I just thought it was all normal.
My father wasn't a violent person. He wasn't abusive towards my mother. I think he was a good role model in my life. So I honestly don't know why I picked to be with my partner.
Violence is not just physical. The word violence comes from the word to violate. And any behaviour that another person exerts on another person that violates their choice is domestic violence.
Domestic violence is bullying.
Domestic violence isn't just being kicked and punched and physically hurt. It's emotionally, it's spiritually.
Whether it's mental, physical, sexual, financial or social, it doesn't matter. It's all domestic violence. Just to wake up in the morning and call you a bitch, that's domestic violence.
The frog in the pot analogy, if you put a frog in boiling water, it's going to freak out and jump out. If you put a frog in cold water, it'll swim around happily. And if you just slowly heat that water up over a period of time, it will cook it to death and the frog won't even know. In relation to domestic violence, it's kind of the same. If it was boiling water, you wouldn't go near that person. Usually, more than it being a cold water, it's like a jacuzzi, that kind of wooing period where it's really nice, like the frog in the water is having a good time. Before you know it, you're in the midst of this escalation or this boiling, experience, and you don't even know how you got there. So you don't know how to get out, and maybe it's too hot and intense to get out.
Here's a clue for you. When I first met him, we had a little bit of an argument, and I didn't argue back. I dropped my head, as I was planning to in those days, like always covering up. And he says, you don't like conflict. And I still remember that saying from then on, because that's when it started. You don't like conflict, so I wasn't going to fight back. He had me from the start.
You think everything is going to be so perfect, you're so in love.
When I first met my partner, I was very young, I was 16. I had not been in a lesbian relationship of any kind before, and I was swept up with that intense love, whatever.
Then I saw it as someone that cared for me in such a way that he didn't want anyone else to hurt me, but it wasn't. In actual fact, it was control.
To begin with, it was only maybe just, abuse, just yelling,
If, you're flinching when someone's yelling at you, like so they're throwing knives at you, that's violence.
He would start getting abusive and calling me names.
And Mum would call me names like pasty-faced nothing and would never amount to anything.
You're fat, you're worthless.
A hoe or a hussy or
Slut and things like that.
You're ugly, you're fat.
No one else would love me.
Nobody would want you.
You're no one, no one's ever going to love you.
What sort of a mother are you?
Well, why wouldn't I drink with a son like you?
Where was I going? What was I wearing? Who was I talking to?
Yelling and screaming.
It doesn't matter where you go, I'll find you.
Is this what you want? Is this what you want?
say if I wanted to go to the shops, he needed to know first.
The longer we were together, the less friends I had.
Oh, she'd turn up at my work. I lost jobs because she was like making scenes and embarrassing us.
Do you have to be on the phone? Do you have to talk to these people? You know, I think that, you know, your friend there, I don't think that they actually, you know, they're a very good friend for you. And so it's this isolating behaviour, but done slowly and slowly and slowly, you don't recognise that that's what's going on.
The only way I could see my friends or family was seeing them while maybe he was at work or speaking to them on the phone, and their names would be under different names in my phone. It was the hardest thing, not being able to speak to those people who I knew could try and make things better.
There's still this fear that it's not okay to be gay. You might not be out. You might have a partner that actually threatens to out you if you don't stay with them or do what they ask.
Silent treatment, three weeks at a time, where he didn't talk to me or the kids because there was a bit of Weet-Bix left on the table or something.
I did leave, and when I went back to my parents' house, and he came, got a stick, broke down my parents' door, attacked my father, put me over his shoulder and left with me. So I knew that this man was quite capable of doing everything he said.
Went from yelling to hitting and spitting, and it just really escalated from there.
I left that marriage, and that's when the violence actually stepped up. And he said that he was going to get me. One time there was a bullet in my front door.
The way that my ex-partner used his body, he was able just to, push out his chest and his angry face, his aggression.
Most of the time throughout our relationship I was pregnant, and he'd hit me in the stomach while I was 6 months pregnant and said, "I hope I kill the baby, I hope he turns out retarded."
He tried to choke me, I hardly talk then, hardly breathe. Asked me to answer that, do I love him or not? I have to say the word I love him even though I'm about to die.
He had a stick he used to call baby. It was taped up at one end. He'd threatened to smash my face in. I put my hand up to protect my face. Ended up with a broken ulna, and when I went to the hospital they questioned the break and said I'd fell on the stairs, and the hospital knew, but no one really pushed things in them days.
This particular relationship had a lot of physical violence. I've been hit in the back of the head with an iron. I've been hit over by a chair. I've also been stabbed.
After his shift at work, he came to my house and I was out the front, and he ran me down with his car. And then he left the scene.
Normally I would push him back or bite him because otherwise I just can't breathe. He's just too heavy. Then as soon as I bite him off, he'll call the police.
He would only honour his access visits if I was there, that kind of thing. So we were starting to recognise that it was about me and that, you know, about how he was making sure that he was still in control of me.
When I go to court, no, I don't have interpreter because normally before we go to court, my husband will ask me that he will talk for me. Like the police will tell me is that there are some AVO against me, but I don't even know what AVO is.
I'd rather a smack in the mouth, seriously, and a lot of women will tell you this, rather a smack in the mouth than the mind games and the fear.
He was threatening suicide. He'd said, you know, before, if you leave, then I will kill myself and it'll be on your conscience. And
he would threaten that he was going to kill them.
He would threaten me a fair bit that if I left him, he wouldn't pay child support, he'd never see our son. If I ever got a new boyfriend to father our son, that he'd find him and he'd kill him.
You know, the truth is the physical abuse did hurt, but I got over it. What I remember is all the verbal abuse that I don't think you ever forget.
I made a decision to take my daughter because at the time when I told you of the physical violence that I'd been having, she didn't care whether I had to bite my daughter in my arms or didn't have my daughter. When I got hit from behind, I sort of didn't expect it. I went down on my side and luckily at the time I could hold on to something on the way down and she didn't fall out or anything. It was good.
I noticed when my son was first newborn, he was very upset when the violence would happen. He would go into hysterical cries. My parents were watching a DVD and my son was with them, and an argument scene had come on the TV and he'd been quiet the whole time, and all of a sudden he's screaming and shaking, his whole body shaking, and that broke my heart. You know, that he was 6 weeks old and something like that could affect him. So yeah, it was the most horrible thing, knowing that someone like that, someone so small, could be affected by something they won't even remember 10 years from now.
He would beat me. I would go and clean myself up and I would go and sit and comfort my children and tell them none of this is any of their fault, that their father is sick. That's the only way I tried to make it right for the children, that their father is sick.
I've got scars from being thrown through a glass window. The kids knelt on nails. They've been belted with everything you can imagine the kids have been hit with, from leather belts to chains, by this man. Then he liked to babysit the kids a lot, which is drinking at the time, keeping me full of alcohol, telling everybody I was a drunk, but pumping me full of it while he was doing what he was doing to the kids and keeping me down.
They witnessed the whole thing from the beginning until now. They hold the truth. They know what's going on. They know how we live. And to be honest, it's fixed their life as well. A lot.
She told me that she don't have to, listen to me, because you're brown, and I can only listen to white people.
It was only in later years that they've opened up a bit to me and told me how it's affected them and how they feel, because they both unfortunately went on to have relationships with men that beat up on them.
I wanted to leave because I looked at my daughter and thought, my daughter doesn't need this either. And it was a bit hard for me because as a man, even when the police got involved, they didn't believe me. So the only people that believed me at the time was my family.
He slit a dog's throat and threw it through my daughter's bedroom window, through the screen, smashed the screen, slit a puppy's throat and threw it at her in her bedroom, and she was 11. She's 30 now. She's got 4 kids. She's pregnant with her 5th, and she's in her 2nd domestic violent relationship. She doesn't know any different.
Well, he returned to the house and tied me up and raped me. And the next day, when I went to report what had happened, he returned to the house and he killed the 2 children and my dad and himself.
When I went to the hospital, I was really reluctant to tell the doctors. No matter what happened, I didn't want to get him into trouble because I still loved him.
I would say I hit it on the doorknob.
I tripped over one of the kids' toys
Or in the shower.
Oh, nothing, ran into a cupboard.
and I slipped down the steps and fell.
I hit myself somehow on something. And
my sons were playing basketball and I stepped off the veranda as the ball was coming past and whack.
As soon as you step outside those doors, there's that like fake, that mask, the veil that you kind of put to show other people that everything is okay.
I would usually wear cardigans to cover my bruises.
I didn't talk much to the doctor because I still need him to talk on my behalf. I mean, English is still... So I just stay quiet and believe in him that he will say what is right for me.
And it's very hard to get believed if you never had a voice in the first place.
The reason that made me stay was my children. I wanted to build this perfect life for them. And, you know, society says the two parents should be together. They should live together and love their children together. But that, in my case, I just couldn't do it.
I'm so afraid of leaving him because of telling the police what's going on, because I love him. In my culture, I don't want my family to see me as a single woman. I've got 6 brothers and I don't want anything to happen to this man if my family find out what's going on and what's happening.
I had no idea I was in the middle of anything that was controlling and abusive until I was right in the middle of it, and my sense of worth and value about me was so low, I didn't know how to get out of it.
I never stayed with this man because I loved him. I stayed with him because I was fearful of hurting my family, hurting my children. And I never once ever thought that he wasn't capable of, because I knew this man was capable of doing it.
I had 3 beautiful kids. God's given me to look after. I have to do that job no matter what. I have to be strong for them.
Our daughter was a baby then, and I think that's what kept me there, because I always believed that a baby needed a mother and a father.
How could we live through that, and how did it go on for so long? But I guess it was just always the fear of what would happen when you did leave.
And the tactics he'd used to make me stay were, I love you, which was it's the most powerful word in the world, and I love you and I'm sorry, you know, we're going to have a family together, you can't leave me.
It was based on both the fear of what he might do and the fear of what he's done in the past.
And it was because I wanted to have a family, and I was sort of brought up to believe that you only get married once, and for better for worse, and I didn't want my children to come from a broken home.
I didn't realise that I was in an abusive relationship. I was in a safety room in a courthouse, and there was a poster on the wall, and it depicted the cycle of violence, and it talked about not just physical violence, it talked about coercive violence, I guess you would call it. There's the event that happens, and then there's the the apologies, and then the honeymoon period. And I was reading it going, oh my God, that's me. I now realise I ripped myself off. It would have been reasonable to leave much earlier.
When I had my son in December, I saw a lot of my friends and family at hospital, and I missed them all so much. Just friends and family show me more love in 3 days than I had gotten in the last near 2 years. And I missed feeling important, and I missed feeling special and loved and just all those things you're supposed to feel. And the turning point really was giving birth to my son, and I've been put in that situation with him there. I just couldn't imagine him going through everything that I went through, and I couldn't let it happen. He was the most important thing in the world to me.
He turned around to my daughter, who was 8 at the time, and said, see what your effing mother's like, she doesn't care about you. And with that, he swung around and he punched me in the face, and immediately my nose started to bleed. It was just bleeding and bleeding and bleeding. And one of my sons came over to me and he grabbed me around my waist and he hugged me and he said, leave my mother alone. And the blood was coming down and going over him. And I think that was when I finally got the light bulb moment and realised that it's time to get out.
Because sometimes your family are unaware of the effects of domestic violence themselves because they grew up on it.
I think the hardest thing for me was admitting that I had made a mistake and I was in a bad relationship. And for me, I felt that I'd failed. I just, all I wanted to be was a wife and a mother and have a home. And
I expected my friends to make me accountable, people that called me their friends. No one made me accountable, nobody called docs on me or anything like that. They allowed all this to happen. I would call docs at the drop of a hat these days to protect a child, wouldn't hesitate.
I left New Zealand because of a violent relationship. I had to get away. I had tried to leave a number of times and my partner had threatened to find me no matter where I went in New Zealand.
And when you do walk out, there's a lot of different things that happen to you when you walk out. You take that risk. And I left him actually 17 times.
I just asked for help. I remember just asking for help to anybody and I just seemed to wake up. I don't know, I just come out of it. It was just like I'd been asleep and dragging my kids around all my life and making no decisions and letting everybody decide for me. And then all of a sudden I went, what have I been doing? I can't even describe how it happened. It was just, I just woke up and then I was guilty and then I said, no, I've got to fix it.
I was advised by the prosecutors to sell my properties, change my name and move away, which is what I did. I'm a different person now. Although I'm teary at the moment, I'm a strong person now. I am. And I know what I want in life.
It has to really start with that flicking of the internal switch about being a survivor. I went from being a mum and just a normal family member to being a victim of domestic violence, and I hated that term. I hated that label. Victim is not just a state of circumstance, it's a state of mind.
No, I'm not a victim of domestic violence. I'm a survivor of domestic violence. People have got to stop looking at us as victims, and we got to stop looking at ourselves as victims. And when we do stop looking at ourselves as victims, that's when we'll be able to put one foot in front of the other and go.
I'm here today to kill all that fear and to let him know I'm still here and I'm not afraid anymore, and I'm not afraid if you find me, and if you see me, I'm here. And I survived.
The tragedy of life is not death, it's what dies inside of us while we live. That summarised a lot of what domestic violence does.
It's affected my health a lot. I don't want to get sick, I just want to be healthy.
Trusting people is such a big deal for me now because I always think twice before I do things. And
I just kept drinking more and more and hitting more drugs and thinking I was functioning until 2 years ago when my daughter rang up and says, that's it, I'm going to take you to court for not looking after me as a child. And I've gone, great, let's crack it open. So I'm bawling my eyes out down here at the legal centre, and a girl's come up to me and she says, have you ever had any counselling? And I've gone, no. And she's gone, don't worry about your daughter in court, you need to come with me.
I'm always getting information about positive stuff happening in the community. And
there's amazing support out there.
I go to women's groups.
There was about 15 of us. It was ladies from all different backgrounds, colours, races, creeds. But in that room, there was this unspoken understanding of knowing exactly the journey we'd all lived through.
My mother was a housekeeper for 12 Maris brothers. My whole life revolved around the church. I believe my higher power gave me the strength to get through the difficult times and to separate the alcohol from the person.
I know I didn't think much of myself for a long time and I didn't like myself. Now I'm a nice person. I know I'm a nice person, I'm a good person, and I deserve respect.
if I had the opportunity to speak to someone who was a victim of domestic violence, who is experiencing it right now, I'd say don't worry, there's always help out there.
Relationships, if they don't work, there's always another one.
You don't have to live like this.
You're great and you're individual and you deserve better.
Don't put it aside. I did for many years, and it's affected me and my children, my family.
Keep your friends and family close. Don't shut them out. Don't make excuses.
Wherever your supports are, if you're ever going through this, Find those support, because those support will help you through.
If you have really trusted friends, to really have somebody there to listen.
My wish is that people will hold on to hope, because sometimes that's the only thing you have left, and that the hope that if you have the courage and the gumption to actually leave, that you'll be supported in doing that.
I can't believe I've achieved this much. Now if I can save someone else from that man or men like him or women like him, because women abuse men too.
If you were able to survive in a domestic violence situation, coming out of it, you can survive anything.
I've said more here today in this room than I can put down on paper for the lawyer. I can't get it out. I'm not interested in the money. To me, this is a better way to do it.
It's everyone's responsibility to do something about domestic violence. We all have the power to say, you can't treat another human being this way. Ignoring it is certainly not the answer. You can do something. You can leave. Or you can help someone else who wants to leave. You can pass on information, or you can just listen. We can all make a difference.
We can 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 make a difference.
Who knows what I'm capable of when you talk to me like that? All the crying that I've done inside. Well, this is not just a lover spat. Everyone keeps on telling me that pride comes before a fall. Hey, yeah, yeah.